The UK's transport authorities are telling airlines to use up to 70% of their airport slots or risk losing them. The new policy has been welcomed by airports but came under attack from airlines, which are concerned they might be forced to fly empty aircraft in order to maintain their valuable slots. Well, Paul Charles is a commentator on travel and tourism, and he joins us now from London. Good to see you, Paul. Welcome back to the programme. So for anyone outside the aviation industry, the idea that airlines would be flying empty planes sounds like madness. Why are they made to do it?
Yes, so these are slot rules that have been in place for many, many years. And essentially, when an aircraft flies, when we get on as passengers, that aircraft is in a particular time slot that it's been awarded. And so it has to fly within that time frame of the slot. And slots are basically how the industry has to operate in a very functional way. So you can imagine when the pandemic hit, many airlines were worried they would lose their slots unless the rules were tightened on how often they had to actually use that slot and fly a plane within that slot. So what the UK is very much proposing is a slight reduction on where things are at the moment, which was 80-20. Essentially, airlines had to use that slot 80% of the time and operate flights in that slot 80% of the time. They're now proposing that it could come down to 70% of the time, which is still quite high compared with where the EU is at on 64% of the time.
So a mixed reaction to this from airlines and airports. What have they been saying?
Yes, there's a difference of opinion here where airports like Gatwick, for example, are saying, well, this is good news. You know, it's a reduction. It helps airlines. It helps them remain very competitive. It's good for consumers because you've got airlines fighting to use their slots properly. But of course, IATA and Willie Walsh, who former boss of IAG, of course, and British Airways, who now is the Director General of the International Air Transport Association, IATA, he is very critical of this. He says 70% is too high. It should be much lower. And all it will do is encourage airlines to fly empty planes in ghost slots, effectively, because the demand isn't back to where it was pre-pandemic. So airlines are forced, because they're trying to hit this 70% rule, they're forced to fly planes which won't have many people on or which won't have any people on at all. And so he would rather see it at a much lower level.
And obviously, if you like, by the pandemic, has it recovered enough to cope with this?
It's a really good question. The industry is still facing tough times, but there is very encouraging news. Just in the last hour, we've seen the UK Transport Secretary confirm that the arrivals tests in the UK for those who are fully vaccinated will be removed from February the 11th, which is just before the half-term school holidays. But it means that if you're fully jabbed, you won't need to self-isolate, you won't need to take any pre-departure tests, and you won't need to take any day 2 tests as well, which had been holding up recovery in the sector. So it's very encouraging news. It means there are hardly any barriers now, just an online form to fill in that remains, but no test costs if you're coming into the UK as a fully vaccinated citizen or a fully vaccinated visitor. And that's very encouraging because it now means that Britain is effectively open for business again without those expensive tests being in place. And that's what the industry wanted.
You mentioned the prospect, though, of airlines running these empty flights, these ghost flights. Obviously, huge environmental concerns over this. What's the case for it?
Well, essentially, so I just missed some of your question there. But in terms of environmental concerns, the industry has been trying to improve where it's at on this. You've got some airlines, like Finnair, for example, who are really working hard to reduce their emissions, to fly cleaner planes, to obviously and also reduce the weight on board their aircraft. And that's what airlines are trying to do. The ball is in the court of manufacturers of engine fuel and the aircraft manufacturers themselves to obviously improve carbon emissions and produce cleaner fuels. There's little the airlines can do themselves apart from buy the best planes which are carbon efficient as possible and introduce less weight on board their aircraft so they're flying with less fuel. But I think we're going to see a game changer in the next 5 years, which is hydrogen. That will dramatically change how clean airlines are. And then if they're flying ghost flights, that won't have such an impact on the environment and will be much better for all of us.